Welcome back to the Maelstrom, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have our second Path of Conquest update at the end of Milestone 3. We're going to do our Knights of the Round table once more. The table is still not round. Only 4 of us are here today. Murdoch was unable to make it, but we're going to go ahead and press on today and cover our Milestone 3 wrap-up. So to start off, a couple of channel announcements. The first thing, when we finish our Path of Conquest campaign, we've been trying to decide what we wanted to do from there once our armies were finished. The next thing we're going to do is take the campaigns book that came out, Chronicles and Legends, and do a Rismark campaign with the 5 armies that we've been playing. We'll continue to expand units when we want to change things out in the army, and we are going to use that book to guide a campaign through the Rismark area. We're going to be using all the rules for that book. If you haven't checked that book out, make sure that you do. It's a very good buy for the amount of money that you pay. Tons of good fluff for the armies that are coming up, and also rules for you to continue to make your own army more legendary and gain rules as you go. The second thing, whenever we finish our Path of Conquest, we are going to immediately launch another Path of Conquest, which will run concurrently with the Rismark campaign. In this one, we're going to be switching up factions. We'll have more details on that a little closer to time. Initially, we're thinking we're going to have 6 players, but we're not sure yet. And we're trying to decide if we want to do individual armies or if we want to have teams. But we'll have more information on that once it solidifies and we get ready to start that campaign to continue after this one. The final bit before we get started that we wanted to announce is our 2,200 point games. We did initially say we were stopping at 2,000. Instead, we decided to add 400 points at every milestone. So we were playing 1,800, which are the games that will be coming up next. And then after that, we're going to be going to 2,200 for our final milestone. At 2,200 points, though, we decided rather than get part way through that, because we are going to play 4 games each, everyone is going to play every other army. Before we get started with that, we're going to wait until the 1.5 rule set comes out. We don't want to get part way through and then realize we either have to change our army or it drastically affects something in our army that we wanted to do differently now. So we're going to put that on hold. So our 1,800 point games may trickle out a little more slowly to cover that time gap. And they may also be some games between 1,800 and 2,200 that are just one-off games between our armies, just to cover the time and make sure you continue to get Conquest content as we move forward. We also have vacations coming up for several people in the group, so it's just going to be best for us to push that 2,200 off a little bit. But fear not, we are going to come back and finish that as soon as we get everything in place with the 1.5 rule set. So the first thing we wanted to cover is go through each game like we have done in the past. The first game we want to cover is game 11. So going into this, we decided to get these games organized. First game at game 11 was going to be Nords versus Dweghom. So the first thing we'll do there, actually before we jump into that, just initial thoughts going into Milestone 3. I'm going to go through each player and let them say anything that they had going in, plans or things they had learned from their army throughout. With the Dweghom, I had definitely seen the infantry horde was working well for me. It was giving me enough chant markers to get done what I wanted to get done. I was especially concerned going against the Dweghom this time because I did not know how I was going to deal with their extreme defense values. And I didn't know what he would be bringing yet. So I kind of wanted to design my list with a little more mobility. I was worried that I didn't have a whole lot of scoring units, but my scoring units were very large, so I figured that would help. And definitely wanted to get the Raptor Riders in play. And did not regret that at all. We're going to discuss units and our impressions on them at the end, but for me, the Raptor Riders were amazing. So I'll pass things over to Caton at that point. What were you thinking going into this one?
There wasn't much thinking. I was just here to play and get to know more of the factions. I think from 600, from Nords and Hunter Kingdom, I went into it as they're going to have a lot more guys that I need to try to get the objectives and try to get as much points as I can while taking down each infantry that they had. Mm-hmm. I think that's mainly what I was going through.
Yep. And also it was nice, I'm sure, to see some of the Ferromancy part of things, which I know you haven't seen Biomancies yet, but definitely brought a different layer to the army for sure.
Yeah. As well as the walking bomb.
Yes, bringing in the Explodey boys was also fun. No luck in your first game with them, which we'll get into that more later, but man, it made a hole whenever you played against the Nords for sure.
Definitely.
All right, Hanser, how about you?
So I kind of came into this one trying to figure out where exactly I wanted to go. I was a little worried not taking range support this time, and because I definitely felt like I needed it. The problem was, particularly with bow chosen, was how to fit them in at this tier. I decided, but I also was running into another problem, that was the Raiders. The Raiders were, while the game was escalating, I kind of felt like the Raiders were, of course, kind of struggling to try to stay within the game. So I decided to come up with a plan to try to keep the Raiders in as much as possible, and the only way that I figured I could do that was essentially to get a healing spell on the Shaman and bring him in to try to do everything I can to keep them around. And that was kind of the initial plan that I was wanting to do, which definitely had mixed results in the end, I believe.
Makes sense. All right. And then for the Dweghom.
So I brought the Flame Berserker blob, gave the Ardent Caraway, Flaming Oratory for Bastion, figured it would make them more survivable, and it proved useful in one game, not so useful in the other. They were a thorn in the 100 Kingdoms side pretty much the whole game, had to commit his whole army, felt like anyways, to deal with them. Wadroon just kind of ran over them.
Unfortunately. All right, so to start things off with game 11, that was Nords versus Wadroon. Don't want to give away anything anybody hasn't seen. So if you haven't watched the games yet, there are tons of spoilers ahead. So it might be best to go ahead and click away to our link to that playlist and watch any of those games that you might have missed. So with that warning in place, Hanser, your thoughts on our game in game 11?
So I have never had a game in terms of reinforcements go this poorly for the Nords, and I kind of feel like out of all the factions, when the reinforcements go bad, the Nords are in the worst position to try to recover from that. And that was essentially the setup that when my stuff was coming in, and I did not have anything ranged to be able to deal with the Raptor Riders, and when I did try to catch the Raptor Riders, it didn't seem like I was doing enough to be able to deal with it, and they pretty much harried me all the way for all the rest of my stuff to get in position. I had 2 times where essentially I lost the initiative. I had the unit that I needed to go get completely destroyed, and then the other unit, the card that came up for them, was for another unit that really did not need to go at that point. And I should have rebuilt my deck with Turn the Tide and whatnot to try to do something to kind of get myself out of that hole, and I definitely learned the harsh lesson in regards to that. I think the other big thing, of course, my Huskarls being a big 6 block, while it's hard to get rid of a block of 6 Huskarls with a Jarl.
Yes.
The problem was that we went to 6x4 this game, and when it was in the 4x4 map over at Carvina, it seemed like they were a nice big stone in the middle that essentially wasn't easy to get around it. 6x4, particularly with the way that we'll talk about with the terrain later, it felt like that I could only dedicate them to one position, less so than the middle, and when I had to move them over to that one objective after my Raiders just got completely thrown out, there was a lot of repositioning that I needed to do, and the Huskarls were desperately trying to get over there and just trying to hold as much as possible, and it just was being worn down. So definitely a lot of lessons to go around that entire game, and stuff that I will seek to correct for future games.
I can definitely see that. I think the biggest thing that I took away from that one, I'm no stranger to Fluid Formation because I played Spires before, and Vanguard Clone Infiltrators were astoundingly mobile. Their ability to get out of bad spots, to do damage even when they had been out-positioned. I had seen that before, but to me, and I don't know if those of you who faced me this round agree, the fluid formation on Raptor Riders feels so much better than it does on Vanguard Clone Infiltrators.
Oh, yeah.
It's good on Vanguard Clone Infiltrators, but they don't really want to fight in combat. And at first, when I played you, my biggest thing was keep the Raptor Riders out of combat until I'm sure I can win a combat. I just didn't realize how powerful their combat attacks were going to be. When the Ogres got a hold of me, I thought, I'm going to have to turn the Blooded in and help fight to clear these ladies up and get them out of combat. And then they just eviscerated those Ogres. And I was like, that really wasn't even like a crazy good roll. Like, they're going to do that fairly regularly. So I really was shocked with how I knew they were going to be very mobile, but I didn't know they were going to be as mobile as they are. And especially, whenever I charged into your Huskarls there at the end, I still didn't have enough faith in that unit that they were going to be able to finish the Huskarls, but they just went through them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's like I've always said. Ogre, they're really good to smash stuff, but they do not do well on the return.
Agreed. They do not take hits back very well. Also, with the Braves and the Scion, I really think until I get more units coming out, I think the Braves are his home. After playing him with the Blooded and with the Braves, I think he's going to belong with the Braves long term. Where their extra defensibility, I think that's a big help. That said, I do think I'm going to move Fanatic away from the Scion. That way the Braves are freer to do whatever. Where their Conquest, it feels bad to pigeonhole them into only throwing Conquest, which I did mess up in our game 11. I didn't realize at first that Fanatic does stop him into just chanting Conquest. So I did mess that up. But even without that, most of what he did would still have been good if I didn't have that upgrade. I was not really using a whole lot more as far as like the third level of the cards. I know that never really came into play. So I think it proves further that he's going to be better off without the Mantle of the Devoted. But like I said, the Raptor Riders were the big thing. The Raptor Riders were huge in that game.
I will say one of the biggest learning experiences, particularly with Scion and Conquest, was when we found out that, the Scion and Conquest can essentially do any of the cults. It definitely makes me have to wonder, so what can this guy actually do? It's like a nice big toolbox that he can pretty much pull out of what he needs, and definitely makes him probably one of the most versatile of the characters, particularly in your faction.
For sure. And previously, I would have said the High Clone Executor I thought was the best character in the game, based purely on his supremacy ability, not even looking at the other things he does. But I kind of feel like the Scion of Conquest is probably the best character in the game, at least for my playstyle, because he has the Tactics 3, he has really good resolve, he's not insanely good at combat, but he gets the job done. He really doesn't have any true weak spots. He's decent at everything. And when you combine that with Crescendo and what that does with the chant, that really makes him, he really fits that slot of the army leader very well.
So I definitely think this was my second game against the Wadroon, and needless to say, it's always been nothing but learning experiences playing against him. And that's really what a lot of it comes down to, is trying to understand what all this faction is capable of. Is I can look at the chant chart, every day, but till you really started coming into the game and see, okay, you have this unit, it has this amount of stats and whatnot, you can pretty much know what a man-at-arms unit is probably going to do, but you get this kind of unit, and then when you have to start putting in your head what the chance could possibly mean to make this unit do something else, it definitely adds a level of dimension that is going to just take experience to have to play with.
Mm-hmm. All right, so moving over into Game 12. Game 12 was the 100 Kingdoms versus the Dweghom. That was our first outing for each of those factions for 1,400 points. Murdoch is not here, but we're going to let Butthut go over his thoughts, and then we're going to all of us go over kind of what we thought of the game as well.
So my game against the 100 Kingdoms, I felt like he committed too heavily to my Flame Berserker blob. I'd say the vast majority of his army, if not everything besides the Theist Priest, committed solely to dealing with my Flame Berserkers, and that ended up costing him the game. There were a few options that I made that could have turned it out different, made it more in my favor. He could have made a lot of different decisions to make it turn out different. The way he played it, though, felt like he was too committed to taking out the one block of Flame Berserkers.
Mm-hmm.
At the very beginning, I was trying to use my Flame Berserkers to cover the biggest gap in his deployment so that if anything came on there, I could handle it. But he kind of refused my Flame Berserkers and came on the complete opposite flank. And I feel like they could have dealt with Holy Fire better than anything else in my army.
I could see all of that. I think also part of it, like, I don't think it can be understated how badly the Dweghom have rolled in this campaign. I don't know if anybody disagrees with me on that, but they've had, for the most part, very bad rolls. The only game I can think of that you didn't really seem to have poor dice rolls was against H, and that's because everybody knows Hanser's the one with bad dice rolls.
He's like conflicting,
It's like two negatives, yeah. So that was basically it. The Flame Berserkers really, even though they went down, they died easier than they should have. Now, with that said, in all fairness, the Household Guard were in the same situation. They rolled terribly as well. I don't know how many times you guys rolled 6s on resolve and then re-rolled and rolled a 6 again, or 6s to hit and re-rolled and rolled a 6 again.
Yep.
The big shocker for me, though, was that the Theist Priest was able to survive those automata.
Yes.
I really feel like he should have gone through those. They should have gone through those militia. I do think, and me and Putthead have talked about this already, I do think if you had committed your raid to that flank and brought him on, that you could have potentially opened the game up more than you did.
Yes.
With that said, there were things that I think the 100 Kingdoms could have done as well to help out. Like you said, the big thing being maybe not committing quite so much to fighting your Berserkers.
Yes.
I think he got a little bit of tunnel vision, which is, you can be forgiven for. When something's defense 4, resolve 5, you know it's going to take some killing to get rid of it. So, thoughts from you two on that game? Anything?
Well, I will say, seeing the Knights actually do flanking, I thought was a bit of an improvement.
Yes.
Even though, it was the Flame Berserkers. But I'm not sure where would have been better for him to have utilized that in that same regard.
Yeah, the only other option I could see was and initially his goal was flank that blob of Hold Warriors, but he saw the ray and decided, no, we're going to go this way. This way looks safer. So,
it's like, nope.
And that's another good point to bring up as far as we're talking about what ifs. What if he had done that and you had brought your ray here, and then he brings his Knights and he was able to share that, then where does that leave us? That might not have changed anything.
Yep.
It could have very easily made it the Rays holding this objective and the
Knights
are holding that objective. So who knows? But at any rate, I do think that was one of the most exciting games. I think it was super close. It is definitely the closest game we've had, because tied on points, went to kill points, and almost tied there. We were actually asking during the last turn, what are we going to do if we tie on kill points too?
Yep.
So I guess at that point we'd have had to go to sudden death, or just let you guys go outside and do one round of boxing or something. All right, game 13. Game 13 was Nords versus Spires. Go.
For me, starting off, I felt like it was over as soon as I started putting models on the board.
Yeah.
Because mine were getting taken down so easily. And and at a point I was like, I had 3 things going in my head. I can either move this way, die this way, or I can just say I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Spires wouldn't do that. We're going to keep going till the last man.
Nobody cares about these men that are dying.
Yeah.
They're an expendable resource.
They'll become popsicles in the snow.
So as soon as I could make that, when I got the withdraw and I got the charge move, I knew it was going to be a different game after that.
I mean, you should have known the fact that I had to, try to keep everything from keeping that freaking bomb from getting over to my Raiders was do everything we can. You practically could have slow-mode it, walking all the way over.
Yeah.
And you definitely played I do have to say, Age played a great game on that part, and you did so good at keeping them away from your Raiders as long as you did. That's no doubt the longest we've seen Raiders hang out on the table.
I mean, that was the whole point to try this thing, is like, just how long can I keep this going?
I think other than that, I don't know. You'll probably say this, but I'm gonna beat you to it. But this is the first time Ugars have stayed on the board the whole game.
Yeah.
Yep. It was a bunch of a shock for me too.
Yeah.
With one wound left, no less.
Full of arrows and wondering what had happened.
Just imagine that poor one little Ugar with like a ton of arrows sticking out of him, walking over this poor Jarl. Like, can I go home now?
Did we win? Yeah, I agree completely with your thing about, early on it looked like you had completely lost that game. I was like, this is going to be the shortest video we've had ever, because they just started piling points up. And then it really did seem like it all swung on the guy freeing himself with that withdraw, flank charging the shaman. You see that mushroom cloud over the hill and Raider bodies flying everywhere, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is a game again.
Oh, the Raider entity.
Yeah, so I think that was a huge turning point in that game for you and made it a game. And I'm sure you were probably sitting there thinking, this is Dweghom all over again. I'm going to get 1 point away.
No, not again.
So, your thoughts on it, Hanser?
Oh, I mean, this had to be one of the most clinchiest games I've ever played, because there were just so many ways that things could go wrong. And I was, because we essentially had two large engagements that were going on, essentially the Raiders and the force drone, the drones and the large Raiders over here. You had the drones and the Huskarls over here, and everything else was coming in. Of course, you had the clones, and then over here you had the brute drones coming in. And essentially, even though there were two separate engagements, there was so many going on that you almost could see how if one thing faltered over here, it could pretty much cascade over here. That was the thing I was worried about the most, particularly when you immediately were trying to go that way. I was like, no, stop that. And thankfully got the charge off of the Huskarls and tried to hold them as much as I could, but to no avail. At the very least, I got in a position to where the Huskarls could at least sort of block the Vanguard clones from clones and drones. So many words.
I play Spires and it's confusing, so don't feel bad.
Trying to keep them from that point. And a lot of that with the Nords is essentially just try to hug the points as much as you can and keep them off of it, because you know that as the game goes on, you're just going to keep losing it. And I'm playing an army that has the ability to bring their stuff back.
Especially whenever you start seeing it whittle down and you see more and more big stuff coming in from them, and then those marksman clones obliterating that Ugar unit, and you're like, I can only let them do that one more time, and then it's like, no wait, I can't let them do that one more time.
Yeah.
That can't happen again.
Phew. One of the things that I thought was funny was originally the 3 Raider group was just, initially they were just going to go and hopefully try to hit the other drone unit that had the walking bomb and try to get rid of it. That was essentially the plan. They were a suicide unit. But when that was kind of changing a little bit, and I just sent the Huskarls on ahead to try to stop them, I had that Raider unit just kind of sitting there. I was like, well, what do I do with these guys? And then I remembered the Abomination's coming. I don't know where he's coming, but he's coming. And I remember the last time Abomination came around and hit the Huskarls.
Oh, yeah.
With you.
Yeah, that was way back the early games.
And I was like, I do not want a repeat of this again. So the the Raiders are going to do the one thing that they're going to do. They're pretty much going to try to get in position for wherever that thing was coming from, and pretty much, offering them up for dinner.
So what lie did you tell them to get them to stand in front of that Abomination like that?
They'll be welcomed in Valhalla.
Well, hopefully Valhalla has suitcases because they're going to have to carry them in bags after that abomination combat.
So the ship, which kind of at the beginning was kind of hampering me a little bit, which kind of was my fault because I chose that side this time, but the reason I chose it was because I felt like I needed the wider lanes for my guys. But it actually came right back around for me this time because with the fact that I didn't know where the abomination was coming from, I threw him in there to basically wait and see, and when he finally came out to play, it's like, here you go. Because I can't believe I actually had to throw a unit in front of Uger to keep the Uger to cap a point. That was definitely a day of firsts.
And it was I liked the fact y'all's game was so maneuver heavy.
Yes.
That was the most maneuvering game that I've seen in a long time. I do think the Nord game was spot on. The thing you did with the Raiders at the end to put them in the terrain to keep them, because I think you were probably in the same boat I was when they moved to the side to make way for the Huskarls. I thought that's it. Like they're not going to have any role in this game going forward. But then when you moved them to the terrain, I was like, okay, from here they can throw axes or they can get out to address either side, and it ultimately I think paid off for you in the end. I do think the abomination might have had more impact if it had come from that left-hand side, but that's all hindsight. Who knows if it wouldn't? It could have changed something else to enough point. It could have, because at that point the Raiders could have left terrain and flank charged the Vanguard clones to help finish them off. So it might not have made any difference at all. But at any rate, it was a fun game to watch because there was movement felt so important in that game.
And unlike with your game, I learned to go back to doing more turn the tides because there were so many, particularly with how much initiatives were being clinched on this time.
Yes.
So it's like I'm going to use turn the tide to essentially be able to be much more flexible in what I need my activations to be, and that definitely helped out a lot more this time. So I definitely learned from your game with that.
Absolutely, I thought it was a fun game to watch. It was very very entertaining, and I hope it was for our viewers as well.
There was also one thing that he did learn from your game with marksman clones. To take I can't think of what's
yes,
Colors
Raiment.
Yeah,
I think it's one of our best relics.
Definitely.
Yeah, that thing is very deadly for marksman clones because you hit them and they just they reroll the ones, and it's like, oh, there you go, they got them. It's like, okay, I can't do anything with them anymore.
That was my fault. I'm sorry, Stargod.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the I remember that one game we played. It was a pickup game before we even started the campaign, and I was playing marksman clones under an executor, and I think I had an eccentric biomancer with marksman clones too, because I just thought they were cool. I didn't realize how good they were against Nords, and this was like pre-Huskarl days, so it was literally just a wave of raiders running up the field into a hell of arrows.
So that shaman was like, I heard about this. I'm gonna go dig up some bones for this one.
That paid off big time in that game. I think I can't believe how I was shocked with how resilient it made that raider unit. I mean, you can't just kill that raider unit now. You have to actually work to get rid of it. So
it was nice to see the Raiders actually give some back and stick around for at least a turn or two more than normal.
And I mean, look at what it took to get rid of them. It took a bomb in the flank, a flank charge, and brute drones to kill them. I mean, that's still a win for you, in my opinion, because of how much it drew down onto that combat. So, So game 14. In game 14, the 100 Kingdoms faced off against the Spires for the second time. In y'all's first outing, Vanguard clones versus militia did not work very well. And in hindsight, we should have put men-at-arms in the 100 Kingdoms army. We were just going off of the initial Path of Conquest ideas, which weren't designed to really create competitive lists. It was more just to get your models painted and on the table. But in hindsight, we should have looked at that a little closer. That said, this time the 100 Kingdoms were able to bring out a win against the Spires. It was a close fought win, but they did get that win. So, Stargard, what are your thoughts from that game?
There's one thing that comes to mind, or actually two things. One, I shouldn't be so going forward with force ground drones. I should have stayed back a little bit instead of going straight into his militia. that was one thing, how they got locked up with Automata. And me and Randall got talking about it, and he said that if that ever happens, you should just leave them. At that point, they're no good for you. Yeah, you might survive, you might not. So in this game, I did. I left them. I was like, all right, they're dead. Like, yeah, it's militia, but they're dead. I had an abomination left, and me and Randall talked again, and he was like, you probably should have just went into the militia. It probably would have saved you 4 or 5 guys. You would have had enough to survive. And then I could have went into his bowmen that were standing there. And yeah, I see that now, but at the time I was like,
you were colored by that creep. I totally understand. And I realized that afterwards. I was like, this is a yin-yang situation. Like last time it was so bad in this one, in this direction, that he pendulum swung all the way to this side. He's like, all right, they're dead. Something touched them, leave them.
Yep.
And I really think if you had swung that abomination there, I think that would have been enough to shatter the militia because it would have been a flank charge. Mm-hmm. And at that point, that would have cleared you to move up, like you said, engage the bowman, take this objective. And I don't think, I might be wrong, but I don't think the men-at-arms would have been enough to drive the abomination off, especially with a handful of bowmen back here.
Yeah.
But your executor at least did bring all of the militia down with him, so it wasn't a total loss. You did get rid of the priest. You rid us of that turbulent priest.
Yeah,
so
he wasn't going out without a fight.
Yeah, so that was cool. I also, like you said, I think you struggled because of that piecemeal fight against the household guard. Like you could never get a good hit against the household guard, and it didn't really ever give you a chance there. Which you did neutralize the household knights completely because you sent the abomination that way. I just think you never really had enough oomph to drive through the household guard, and it might have helped you to have, like we said, stay back, let them charge your drones, and then go into them with the Vanguard clones in future turns.
And even with the Force-grown drones, I when I went up there and charged them, I totally forgot I had a catabolic node. I just slipped my mind. So whenever I was watching them get destroyed and then shattered, I was like, man, I totally forgot. So if I would have stayed back, it would. I think if he would have charged me, he would have maybe got it half or shattered him again. I don't know. But if I would have gotten that charge off, I could have killed most of them.
And also, it didn't help that the mercenary crossbows hit with like 2/3 of their shots.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was painful too. Thoughts from Putt Hut or Hanser on that game? Anything y'all want to add? Nothing coming to mind immediately?
Nope.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Well, I definitely think you got more out of your abomination that game, at the very least, which definitely tore up quite a bit. It definitely did what the abomination needed to do more in that game than in mine, it looked like. But then again, it did get out a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always kind of the iffy things with particularly heavy monsters, because very few armies have abilities to really get them out fast enough to be able to make them feel like they can make some kind of impact on that. But it definitely did on that one. So I'm glad you chewed up 100 Kings more than my guys with that.
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, because he killed the household guard and the household knights. That's pretty impressive. And you couldn't make a save on him. Like, most of your dice that game were fairly normal, but you rolled terribly for your abomination. And if you could have got him just a turn sooner into position, it didn't matter when you got there because it was going to end up being 12-12 regardless. Yeah. But even one turn sooner, you could have hit the crossbowmen, destroyed them, and then potentially had that chance to make that run on the other objective. But you did do several things better in that game, I feel like, and also I think now see the middle ground of when to turn back and protect the archers and when to just say leave them.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
All right, so that takes us to Game 15, our final game for Milestone 3, the Dweghom versus the Wadroon. I will turn it over to Putt Hut to start off there.
So I moved on the middle of the board to keep the Theist Priest reaction from happening again, and I feel like it forced you to make a very tough decision.
It did, 100%.
That was kind of my thought process about putting them where I did. Turned out not to make that big of a difference. They did take out the slingers, but that was about all they did. if I could have charged into the Raptors instead of the Slingers, I feel like it would have been a different game from there on out completely.
Yeah, at the very best for me, it would have been a reactionary game from then because I would have been responding to what you did, I feel like. Because it would have removed my speed.
And also, if your Raptors had chosen to run out that flank, if my Inferno Automata had caught them, I feel like it would have been different.
Yeah.
I feel like if either of those things had happened, it would have been more in my favor.
Yeah. And I definitely think you used your Flame Berserkers correctly because when I watched your game against the 100 Kingdoms, I was thinking, okay, what I'll do is when he moves his Flame Berserkers on, I will respond to the opposite flank. And that will let me ignore it. And it forces your Kiraway to either stay down here or commit another unit, move away, and lose those points for a turn or two. I was like, either way, that's a win for me because if he's turning in and marching, that gives me a flank as he's coming down my line so I can hit him as he moves down the salient. The problem is you march right on the middle of the table and I was like, never mind. We're just going to go fight him. So that helped. Even with all the attacks the Raptor Riders had, I did not think they were going to do that much damage to the Flame Berserkers that fast.
I didn't think they would either.
I thought I made a lethal error in the second turn of that game.
Second turn.
By moving sideways because for some reason I did not think your double march had the distance it did. But then I stopped and thought, I'm like, no, 2 double marches. He's in the center of the table more or less. So I had this moment of I've made a bad mistake, and if I lose initiative, I probably lose on this turn. I do think because then you want initiative, and I understand you wanted to get your Bastion up and do Dismay. I totally get that. But I do think if you had activated your Flame Berserkers first, you would have won. I see why you did what you did because that went from I have to kill 4 Raptors to I have to kill 3 Raptors to shatter the unit. So I understand that, but I do think if the Flame Berserkers had gone first, I would have at least had my Raptors crippled, if not destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And the Raptors did all the damage that game. I mean, they destroyed your Flame Berserkers, they destroyed that block of Hold Warriors on the flank, and then they shot the last 2. Somehow she threaded the needle with 2 arrows through that press and knocked the last 2 Hold Warriors down, and your Ray started grumping and rumbled off the field again. So.
Yep.
But at least, hey, I did something nobody else has done. I actually made him bleed in a duel. I don't think anybody's done that yet. So.
No, you're going to pay for that.
So points to the silence so far. We might regret it next time we see the Ray. Any other thoughts on that one?
Not that I can think of.
Your whole ballista need to start wearing their armor to battle.
Yeah.
That'd help. Because against the 100 Kingdoms and Murdoch, he holy fired you once, and you had like what 3 left? 2. Yeah, 2. That's right. It got 10 of them, and then I beat you in combat in like 2 clashes, right?
Yep.
I mean,
you killed 6 the first time, 6 the second time.
I don't know what you're putting in that boat in your wrecked village here, but it stinks to the Dweghs, and they forget to carry their shields when they stand in it. So maybe it's all the tar pits. You know, you guys like lighting yourselves on fire and being in a boat that could be lit on fire pretty easily. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Must be. But
at any rate, I thought that game was going to be closer than it was, and it just felt like your game plan kind of fell apart because of just a couple of moments when dice or one activation versus another just didn't fall correctly.
Yep.
Because I was terrified of your Flame Berserkers going in, just so you know.
I'm glad they had that effect on you and Murdoch.
I'll admit it now. I wasn't going to say it before the game, but I will admit it now. How about from this end of the table? Any additions for our game?
Well, when you do bring up the Bastion thing, coming from a character, it definitely brings this interesting dilemma that people get put in on whether they should be using their character just to put up things like Bastion, and why having your regiment be able to do it is far more valuable than your character, particularly if it's a character that isn't going to be doing much else beside that. But at least with him, he had the dismay, of course. But I do kind of agree that maybe if he just went on, just berserked and went on through, it probably would have been the better option, just to try to get rid of the Raptors at the very least. But I mean, with how your dismay has gone, who knows? I mean, it's had pretty good luck so far.
I think I'm the only person that dismay hasn't destroyed a unit yet. I'm going to regret saying that, but. I think I'm the only person who hasn't had a unit destroyed by dismay yet. There was one other thing in regards to what you said. Trying to think. Go ahead.
The only other thing I was a little, I don't know, with the Ray, when you had him coming in on the far side, I've always wondered if that was the best place for him to have gone at the time.
I've wondered that too.
But it is a hard call, unfortunately, just because, he's moved 5, he's slow as dirt, unfortunately, to try to get him into one of those positions. But I've always wondered if he had gone for the other objective, if that would have been better, but I don't know.
Hindsight's 20/20.
It is.
And as far as the Bastion bit too, I mean, we saw that play out several times in this round because it was with his Kiraway against me. We also saw it a couple of times for the 100 Kingdoms. Murdoch would activate, like he had that choice. He was in that crunch where 2 units really wanted to go first, and you kind of had to put that unit first. He did it against the Flame Berserkers, and he did it against the Vanguard or the Abomination. And in both games, they would go first. They would get their damage done, but then they would take a ton of damage in return because the Noble Lord hadn't been able to activate yet to give them Bastion. It almost feels to me like you want to have that on a character that has some sort of draw event that can also activate the squad. So that the character can go first, then he can activate the squad can go, and then he can Bastion the squad all at the same time. It feels like if you don't have a way for the regiment to Bastion themselves, that might be the better approach.
It definitely makes me appreciate stuff like Fire and Advance a lot more.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in my first game against you, Fire and Advance felt useless on the Raptor, on the Predator that was on the Raptor. But then after the game with you, I started realizing, when I fire and advance, I don't have to shoot. It lets me activate the regiment. So this gives me the ability to pump an extra card into the sequence all at once. It lets me do the business with the squad, and then if I need a duel afterwards or something, it lets the Raptors break the squad before the Predator goes to issue a challenge. There's just a lot of things you can do when your character also activates a unit altogether, is one thing. Any thoughts from the end there? Nothing to add on that one? Okay, so with the games covered, we are going to move over into Milestone 3 review. Here we're going to kind of go over any thoughts that each of us might have about factions or units throughout, our favorite units within our games, our least favorite units or units that we may not be bringing back to the table, and also kind of cover, some other tangential things that went on during the games that we want to talk about. So, starting down here with the Spires, what did you think of some of the units you added? Did you like them, dislike them? What did you think?
I think I liked them a lot. The Abomination, to me, is just like any other monster. It just has more wounds. I mean, it didn't have anything that struck out really good to me, but it's like every other, except for like Terrifying. That was the only thing that really got me like, oh, okay, I could use that for knocking down -1. The other one was Catabolic Node. That one I really liked.
Those things are fun.
Those things are very fun because once I get a Biomancer in, I explode one of them on Clash, and then I regrow them back.
Yeah, grow your guys back.
Yeah.
You just explode and then grow some guys back.
Yeah,
it's perfect.
That is going to be very handy for the next couple games that we play.
Yeah, for sure. Anything you didn't like that you played? I think you didn't really like the ranged Executor, right? I think you said you wanted to go back towards a melee-oriented Executor.
I feel like he hit maybe 1 out of 3 times.
Yeah, you did roll really badly with him now that I think about it.
And it just seemed like when I played him as a combat character, he'd always hit. It always went through. So
maybe he just doesn't want to shoot.
Maybe that's just how he is. I don't know. I haven't asked him. I'll have to ask him next time I see him.
All right, Hanser, how about for the Nords?
So, in one game, the large unit of Raiders definitely did what I felt needed to be done. The other game wasn't so much. So, they've kind of been a big mixed bag, and spending 40 points on that heal spell plus 20 to be able to do it, I've kind of been weighing whether or not to keep it or not. But if anything, I do think I wanted to keep something to where the Raiders wanted to stick around was a priority at this point. But like I said, not having range support definitely was kind of a bit of a falling point for this 1400 game.
How about multiple Uger? What did you think about the 2 Uger squads?
Throwing in a second unit Uger was kind of I thought, just a decent way to get more. One, I needed another medium unit. That was kind of the big thing. I felt like going into 1400 with essentially only Huskarls and a big block of Huskarls and 1 Uger I didn't think was going to work. So essentially that was the cheapest way, I thought, to essentially bring in another medium unit. And I was surprised that they stuck around, particularly during the game of the Spires, at the very least, to be able to cap. But it kind of came to the point that I realized, I'm probably going to need to break up this Huskarl unit and probably do at least 2 units, maybe not as big, but at least sizable enough that they can cap points. So I may cut this. I'm thinking about cutting the secondary Uger unit, and I think it's definitely time to bring in some range support.
Bow chosen, maybe? Might see some bow chosen?
Yeah, it is definitely looking like bow
Oh,
chosen.
yeah, bow chosen.
I'm in trouble.
And maybe it could be some trolls in the future. Just because also another thing is I think I need a move 7 unit.
Yeah, not being able to shoot the Raptors and not being able to move as fast as the Raptors is a bad place to find yourself, because it's hard to get initiative at that point.
And I kind of wanted my experience with the Nords to kind of reflect kind of the beginnings of where the Nords were when they first started, when it was just basically Raiders and Uger, and kind of the difficulties we had with that. And as we moved on, Huskarls get brought into the mix, and while they definitely bring in a much needed stability to the force, as things have progressed, Bow Chosen and Trolls have definitely brought in some new things, albeit expensive, but definitely bring in an edge to Nords that I think my army kind of need.
So you heard that too. He just admitted that he's been giving us easy mode. That's why he's lost.
Yeah.
This is like Rock Lee and Naruto pulling the leg weights off.
Yeah.
So we might be in trouble. I'm just glad I don't have to face them next round. I get to see how they do before I have to worry about it. All right. So what about for the Dweghom?
I really enjoyed my Flame Berserker blob. It was like a pet unit. I didn't expect them to survive, but it was something that I felt like I had come up with on my own without any conversation with anyone else. And it proved to work out in a fashion that I planned on. Aside from the rolls against the Wadroon, it felt like they survived incredibly well, if not better than I expected. And the Ardent Caraway being with them throwing Dismay, it just helps because they're throwing so many attacks with Flurry that they can kill half the stands to shatter them because the Ardent's already dismayed them. It just felt like a different game to me.
Yeah, it definitely was entertaining to me. I've told you before, Ardent's my favorite part of the Dweghom army. I want Initiates and Wardens so bad I can't stand it, so that I can just do Caraway, Wardens, Initiates, and Flame Berserkers. So it was fun to me to see how they performed on the table. And even though the Raptors dealt with them pretty well, I still love the unit. I still enjoy it a lot. So for the Wadroon, for me, Raptor Riders are terrible. I'm never taking them again. And that's a lie, just so everybody knows.
You better tell the truth there.
Raptor Riders are insanely good. I think in a game that's all about maneuver, a unit that can move that fast and turn at will is incredibly powerful, coupled with the Predator to get the 2 cards every time they activate. So now we're looking at a level 1 Conquest, potentially, because you can drop the Touched by the Goddess on the Predator to make her Cult of Conquest. At that point, she chants Conquest, they chant Famine. That's level 1 Conquest. They're marching 11 inches every time they activate. or double famine, and they have +2 clash when they inspire. Just that outside of the rest of your chance sequence is insane. And then you add in the other things that you can do, and it makes them very, very good. The slingers, I know I've had them in previous games. I just cannot convince myself I like slingers. They just seem like they're slightly falling short. They're restricted rather than mainstay. They're more expensive than hunters are. Their range technically is longer than hunters, but really is less than hunters. And hunters are better at clash than they are. So for me, I feel like in future games, I might be moving away from slingers and just bulking hunters instead. Maybe if they do something else with the bullet carver in future rules. But right now the bullet carver feels really weak because he doesn't get the armor piercing help against their resolve, which essentially means it's either going to be the same or worse. And don't try to shoot flame berserkers with a bullet carver because nothing's going to happen.
What's that?
So I think for the time being, I'm going to drop them and move over into more hunters or put the points elsewhere. And the Warbred are here finally. So there will definitely be some Warbred coming at 1800. The last thing I think we wanted to cover is the terrain, how terrain worked out differently. In our first milestone and our second milestone, we had just the blocks of village terrain. No real special rules, just garrisonable pieces that you can stand in. And they didn't play a huge impact on the game. There was an occasion here and there where they would have an impact. It did feel like the terrain was much more impactful this time. Where we used hindering, it forced you to think about where you were sending your stuff. Dangerous definitely makes you think about where you're sending your stuff.
Particularly you have cavalry.
Yes, and the boat seemed to be the focal point of a lot of games. Now that I think about it, a whole lot of stuff happened around the boat wreck.
Every single game you got garrisoned, right? By at least something.
I think so. When we played, it didn't. That was the one exception. But it did block charges because your raiders couldn't get to my blooded, and it gave me a free flank protection. So, I mean, it had an impact in every single game.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody else got thoughts on the terrain?
It definitely impacted my game with you. Kept my array from just coming straight at your scion.
Yeah, so instead of charging and hitting, you had to charge and wait a turn to hit, and it saved me some damage.
Yep.
True.
I think the biggest thing regarding that mountain that was kind of in the way on mine, it's like I couldn't even get the Ogre to fit through. I don't know how the Knights managed to do it.
By the little L, and he had like exactly enough space to squeeze them through there.
But apparently Big Ogre just like, nope.
Yeah. That mountain actually, I think, hurt you in both of your games, didn't it?
Yeah, and unfortunately one of those I chose that side.
Yeah, you were saying, I remember before you started, you were like, I'm going to end up regretting this.
Yeah.
But I felt like I needed those. It felt like larger charge lanes were what I needed for my Nords, since I was trying to go for much wider stuff.
And I think there is an argument for playing on both styles of table, where there's more open areas and everything, and also less room to maneuver. But personally, I felt like this was there was more thinking involved in this game, and I did like that. It wasn't just I can go where I want to go. You knew there were limitations going in.
I definitely did like that this thing kind of helped block his Vanguard clones from getting a point.
That's true. It did, because if that hadn't been there, his charge would have landed in a way that would have had him on that point, and that could have turned the game. So,
I mean, we practically had to measure the space to see if it was going to work or not.
And it was pretty much exact. There was not any extra room. I think if he had had one more stand of force-grown drone survive, it would have blocked him, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
I can't, stress how much that came down to hairs at certain areas.
it really did. All right. Anything else? Wrap up thoughts. Anybody got anything else to add? Do you still hate Dismay? You didn't face it this time. Do you still hate
I'm
it?
probably going to hate it next game, though.
No, I made somebody else hate Dismay this time around.
I forgot, yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, I think that's about all we've got for today. We have a Patreon channel, as we've told you several times before. If you're interested in supporting us on Patreon, we have perks for anyone who does that. Those perks include ad-free videos, early release, and early access to our content. You can also, if you subscribe to our Ship Captain level, get access to merchandise every 3 months that'll be delivered to you from Patreon. We also have our affiliate link through Parabellum's e-store. If you go there, whenever you check out, it's a little bit tricky. You do have to click on the question that says, do you have a discount voucher? If you click on it, a box will appear. You can type Maelstrom 10 into that box, and you will receive a 10% discount off of your order. That will send an affiliate fee to us for getting you over there to sign up. And that's a win-win because it doesn't cost you anything extra, saves you money, and helps the channel continue to grow. To those of you who have supported us and continue to do so, we appreciate it more than we can say. If you haven't already, like this video and subscribe. Feel free to share it with your friends because we want to expand into the rest of the Conquest community. We want everybody to see what we're offering, and we want to continue to help grow this game. Once more, as we've said before, thank you to Parabellum. You have been supportive and helped us with our channel as well. Your customer service is excellent. I know I bug you guys to death sometimes as I send you questions and have Q&A and shipment queries and everything else for you. But thank you for what you guys do. We love your game. We appreciate everything that you've been doing for us, and we hope to continue to showcase it in the future. So stay tuned because we're going to be coming back with some 1800-point battle reports in the near future. We're also going to be starting our Rismark campaign very soon. I don't know about the rest of these guys, but I'm chomping at the bit to start carving up some 100 Kingdoms territory. Since he's not here, we can talk about it. I can't wait to start carving my piece out of his kingdom. When 1.5 comes out, we will be finishing our 2200-point games and show you the final scores for our Fate of 5 Generals campaign. As always, thank you for spending time with us today at the Maelstrom.